So let's talk about cell injury. Um, our cells become injured um, in different ways, right? So there's different causations of cell injury. There's different ways that you can become injured. So let's just name a few of them. So these are the causes of cell injury. The first and most I expired right there is called hypoxia. Yeah, and hypoxia just means hypo means low, oxia means insufficient oxygen, right? So it's just low oxygen or no oxygen or loss of oxygen. So loss of oxygen. Um, Now, if you remember from my last video, we went into the etymology of the word spirit and how it derives from spiritus, right? Oops, and how that really comes from breath or brathos, but basically your spirit is your breath, right? So that's where we get words like respiration or inspiration, right? To lift your spirits, to become inspired. Um, that's where those derive from. But your cell has a loss of oxygen. That's really saying it has a loss of breath. What's the first thing that happens when you hold your breath? You lose consciousness. So before your body dies, you already lose consciousness without oxygen. Everything in your body will die if it doesn't have oxygen. Oxygen is the spirit force that runs throughout our body and that is all around us. Um, so hypoxia is the number one most common form of cell death, and it's also what happens to everybody when they die. They can no longer breathe. So it's if you think about it that way, it's also the number one cause of all death. Um, so you lose your spirit, you lose your breath. Um, some may experience anxiety and have a loss of breath. Okay, sorry about that. We're back. Hypoxia, most common causes of loss of oxygen, or most common cause of cell death is hypoxia, loss of oxygen. You guys see that all right? Scoot, scoot. Maybe. Wow. Is that better? That's not too bad. Okay. All right. Yeah. So, hypoxia is the number one cause of cell death. Now, without oxygen, oops, without oxygen, you cannot produce ATP, um, which is basically the heart of your cell. It produces um, the electric force to jumpstart your cell, right? It's your energy. So ATP is adenosine triphosphate, and the phosphate is the most important part of it because phosphate, um, you know, phos is the light. It's the electricity that starts the chemical signaling for everything that you do. For me to move my body, for me to think, for my cell to function. They need ATP. We need energy, and we have to get that energy from the right places, though. As I cough. So ischemia is probably the number one cause of hypoxia, and ischemia is loss of blood. Blood is where we get the word, well, blood comes from the word bless or blessed. Um, and it's the sacred. It's without blood, we also can't exist. Blood is the transporter of the oxygen. Obviously, you guys know that. But it's just it's very crazy that all these anatomical and physiological aspects of the human body relate back to spiritual wording and word origins and everything. So let's keep it moving. Other than ischemia, you could have something congenital, you know, so you could just be born with something, and that's just how your body has been injured. Um, so it's familial, and that that's something that I think is the hardest to struggle for people to struggle with, right? 'Cause it's just something that they can't change. But you gotta try and believe that there's reasons to everything, just like there's no chance, and how everything um, exists on a scale, right? So nobody can be truly perfect in our own individual ways. We're all individually perfect um, in terms of the fact that nobody is truly the same. You know, on a spiritual level, you can have twins, right? But okay, so we have the two causes so far: hypoxia, loss of oxygen, loss of spirit, loss of breath, loss of consciousness. Familial, something in your genetic code that comes out with you having a genetic predisposition in some part of your development. Um, so the script that your life is made on um, is also comes on a scale, right? Also can have a polarity in terms of its expression. It can express things, every little thing on a different pole, right? Some have blue eyes, some have brown eyes, some have white skin, some have dark skin. Um, you know, it's just everything exists on a polarity and a correspondence to everything as well, and a cause and effect for these type of things to happen. Um, but it's horrible, there's not much spiritual explanation that you can give besides somebody who's reincarnates to a life that they're supposed to learn from. For example, there's the story from the Bible of when the mother asked why her son was born blind, and I think that Jesus said that it was so that the child could see more from within. Um, so there's a reason for everything. The the next thing that's we're gonna get into seriously is pathogens. Pathogens. So path comes from pathos, the Greek word for suffering, and gen comes from genus or gene, right? Your code. These are coded to generate, to be the genies of suffering, right? They're suffering generators. Um, that's what pathogens are. Now, pathogens, I have a little way of remembering all the different things, and I go, very bad people, very bad people form pain. Ow. So you have viruses, You know, you have bacteria, just like and parasites. You got parasites. You got fungus, fungi, prions, which are like prion means saw or thing. It's just little, um, and it's funny because I think of proteins as tools, and these are like bad tools, right? So they call them like saws, and it's misfolded protein. And then P, there's defective proteins, and P is protozoas. Protos. So those are all the different agents of disease, agents of suffering. Um, and we're going to talk about how that directly corresponds. These are the three principles that we're going to be focusing on now: correspondence, cause and effect, and mentalism. Um, to these demons, these parasites. And before I go into them, I will say that there's other ways that we can become injured. You know, we can have physical injury. Um, you know, like let's say you take a baseball bat to the leg, it's gonna injure your cells, your leg. Just a straight up physical injury. You have chemical injury. Um, you know, eating McDonald's every day or drinking alcohol or these chemtrails. Who knows? Chemical injury. That's that's a man-made, um, non-natural way of injury that can affect us. Um, you can have nutritional and vitamin imbalances. You know, it's all about balance, uh, being centered. So, you know, there's different vitamin deficiencies you can have, or mineral deficiencies, cell salt deficiencies. Those are other topics I'll get into in another video. But today we're really going to be focusing on pathogens, the causations of suffering, and how to combat them. So let's get into it. All right. So how do these things infect the body, right? How do pathogens mess up our cells? Well, most of them produce toxins, right? So they're producing toxic contaminations of our cells. Okay, so just to go back to cell injury, how are these um, pathogens going to injure you? What are they going to do to affect you, to drain your energy? And one thing they do is they infect your cells. They release toxins, and these toxins either break you down or in viruses they'll go into your DNA and they'll change your DNA. They'll have your DNA changed by yourself. So you're still in control of even them and what they try and do. The words you let others put on you, excuse me, are very important, right? Because um, words are swords. Um, a lot of these words may have one letter difference, um, and have a huge amount to deal with in terms of their connotation and their meaning still. So words can affect you more than most physical things can sometimes. And you know, if you are thinking negatively towards someone from across the room, even, and you're focusing on a vibration of hate, somebody can feel that from across the room. You just feel like somebody is mean mugging you, Or it's the other way around. You know, you could feel as if somebody is trying to express love to you, um, and the words that you accept and what you call yourself and what you hold on to that others may have said to you has a lot to do with who you are today. So try and think about some of these words that you're holding on to, because that's the exact same way that they affect your DNA is on the microscopic level. These little things. So you can either when you get poisoned by these toxins, everything's on a scale, right? You can overreact, underreact, or don't react, right? And that's the scale. Not reacting to another person's opinion, um, it's probably the best thing you can ever do. Um, could stop these parasites in their tracks, right? These parasites. Now we're going to go into before I go into the origin of these parasites. I'm just going to go into a little more about how they'll affect us, right? So a cell becomes injured. Let's draw a little virus, a little cabal and tree of life looking virus, right? All this thing does is go inside your cell and change a phenotype of your cell. And a phenotype, I'll pull up the etymology right here. So a phenotype, you know, has to do with the characteristics and traits and strengths of your cell, right? A cell will change if it has to. It'll change either a phenotype, its size, or its number. Maybe it'll get some people to help it get through something. Maybe it'll change its size to if size if it's a physical thing, it'll change its physical appearance or form, either for the good or for the worse, right? You can react neutral, too much, or not enough to any of these, right? Or it'll change its phenotype or its function. Most important, a cell dies when it's not following its purpose. A cell starts to become injured when it's not following its purpose, when it's not following its true function. When a cell is following its true function, everything is homeostatic. It's balanced. Um, it's in homeostasis. So a cell who does not change its function or does not adapt a phenotype or improve or change to a specific phenotype or characteristic or aspect of light of knowledge that the cell has acquired to change, right? You need to have the knowledge when you go down in the depths and you come back the elixir of life. You need to realize that's why you see all those movies with the demons being casted out, because they know their names. um, and that the enemy is only an illusion, um, and the illusion shatters when you break the illusion. And by breaking the illusion is that there is no enemy. It's how you let something affect yourself, because there are no enemies when you do not let anything affect you. You can become invincible to this, um, to these parasites. You can live disease free. Everything is mind. Now let's get a little more deeper into this. the cells have to adapt in order to change to this problem, whatever it may be. Maybe it's a little Campylobacter bacteria, or maybe it's Vibrio cholera, or whatever it is. Um, these things have to adapt. The cells have to adapt, right? If you don't adapt to a problem, you can't get past the problem, and you stagnate, and life requires movement, and you die. Um, so, not to get real like that, but the cell actually with stress, when you increase stress, the cell like closes its pores off, its cellular pores, so the inside of the cell starts to become very acidic. It's not releasing what it needs to. Um, you know, if you look at storms, storms are a beautiful way that the earth releases energy, right? Or even when we cry, we produce this water and this inflammation, and when we release it, our body actually, our cortisol levels drop, our blood pressure drops, we feel better, right? So whatever's bad has to be let go. You have to let go in order to receive new life. And cells can change before it's not too late. Because when it's too late, when your inside is becoming so acidic that you just can't take it, the walls burst open and the cell's no longer. The cytoplasm, the blood of the cell, without the blood, there's no oxygen within the cell, within as above, so below. It's really, really the sacred science. Um, so they must change its size, number, phenotype, or function in a response to a change in their environment. When their environment changes, much like the hero's journey, when the call to adventure or apoptosis, the apostasis, when those type of things happen, the death and rebirth stage, um, that's the reverse, right? That's when you're going back up the hill. So that you need to find the light. You need to find the phos. You need to find the phen, the pheno, the light bringing knowledge, the illumination. Um, if the stress is too severe, the cell cannot adapt. And this is what actually causes injury. If you cannot get past something, you cannot adapt to a situation in some way in your life, it's going to manifest in a physical way. Maybe not now, but eventually it will. And when you're injured, when you're down, when you're wounded, you can't be as much of a warrior um, against these bad guys. And some of them love to be acidic. Campylobacter um, stays in your stomach acid, right? Just loving the heat. He can stay in any type of heat. And so these things drain you of your spirit. They drain you of your breath. They drain you of your oxygen, which drains you of your energy, which affects every function that you do. When you're depressed, you want to lay down all the time. Speaking from personal experience, we've all been down in the dumps before, and you don't feel like doing anything when that happens. So let's just like go over some of like how you change and how your cell changes, right? So I'm gonna speed things up because I know these are probably way longer than they need to be. So there's two ways you can respond to stress, and it's a good adaptation or a bad adaptation, right? If you adapt, good or bad, and not at all, you die, but you become acidic and burst, right? So if it's a good adaptation, that means you can reverse what's happened. Um, if it's bad, you can't reverse what's happened, and not to say you can't reverse what, because things happen and you can't go back in time, of course. But that's saying what you do, there's no like coming back from the stress that you're in, when there in fact always is, as long as you know the right things to do that you need to do to see and to gain the light and the knowledge you need on whatever um, specific situation that is. People die because of what they don't know. People die because of what they don't know. A lot of people, some people die because of what they do know. But that's a little more under the radar, right? But yeah, people die because they don't know. People commit suicide because they don't realize a lot of their own power, a lot of their own strength. They give up hope. They think that there's no changing, there's no reversing, right? And this happens in our cells too. Our cells actually have a protein called P53, which is programmed cell death, protein 53, which triggers apoptosis, which is cell suicide. The interesting thing about this is that that's a normal thing, right? When cells understand that death is inevitable and they need to die one day. For if the cells don't die, they continue to grow and live, and they start to follow the path of self. And this is where things like tumors and cancers develop. Um, so the way you think is going to correspond to your cells. So if you're thinking very materialistically and or sexual, or in matters of lust, um, then your cells will exhibit the same type of behaviors, and this is where you'll see um, certain things come out of nowhere. This is beside, I talked about familial things. You do have familial um, occurrences of disease, but these are mainly emotion, thought-based origins of disease that I'm specifically referring to. Um, if you're depressed and have no energy, your cells in turn are going to have no energy. If you don't have a purpose, or if you don't know your purpose, then a certain aspect of your cells, depending on which aspect of your body is affected, based on whatever corresponding situation that you're going through in life is, it's going to directly correlate. So when you start with a cell, you have a homeostatic cell, and it's gonna be in the presence of something bad, right? It's gonna come into a toxin, um, or it's gonna come into ischemia, which is loss of blood or oxygen or blessing, right? So loss of others, but loss of spirit. And the toxin is just poison released by negative entities, negative energy, really. Um, and toxins only affect you if you let them go beyond the surface, if you let them within. So a lot of parasites and pathogens come from what we eat, what we take into our body, we become. In the Lost Gospel of Thomas, I'm paraphrasing, but there's a passage that talks about where Jesus is explaining to his apostles, and he says, "Blessed is the lion whom eats the man, for the lion becomes man, and cursed is the man who's eaten by the lion, for the man becomes the lion." So it's not necessarily saying you are what you eat. It's more saying what you eat becomes a part of you, and what you take in to your body. Now, this isn't just eating. This is also words, emotions, whatever you're holding within you, is going to affect you and become part of you. Now, this is when the adaptation comes in. So, what are you going to do when this happens? You have two choices. Um, whatever kind of problem this is, you can adapt or you become injured. You have a punch getting thrown at you. Are you going to move out of the way or are you going to get hit? You have to adapt. You have to have movement. Now, the injury doesn't mean it's over. It can go both ways. You can become wounded and with being wounded, you can either adapt or die. This is the point of no return for your cell, for your life. If you're wounded too much, if you let yourself become injured too much, or your body is beyond the point of reversible injury where you can adapt, then it's irreversible, and that's cell death. And cell death can occur in like 3 different ways: necrosis, which is tissue death or cell death; apoptosis, which is programmed cell death, cell suicide; or necroptosis. Yeah. So basically, the response of how you respond to this injury, it varies, right? Just it varies on the type of injury. The response to the injury depends on many things, right? So this is the same as it is in real life as it is with our cells. So the first one is the type. What's the type of injury? This is the causes. This is the response. Depends on these. Okay. So the response depends on the type of injury, the duration, and the pattern, the severity or intensity, the cell's metabolic state. So the cell's physical. Wow. I'm running out. I'll be right back. Okay, so welcome back. We are talking about the types of response we can have to our cells being injured, and it depends. And this all has to do with the injury. Oh, that's much better. All right, so number 4 was the physical state of the cell, or us, our physical state. Number 5 is our mental state, and this is the cell's ability to adapt, right? To adapt. Adaptation. In order to adapt, we must change our DNA to form the tools that we need, the proteins that we need to combat whatever stressor, whatever causation of suffering that is causing us imbalance. So if we realize that we don't have the ability to adapt, then that's where the loss of hope comes from. But there's always the ability to adapt, because there's always the ability to change your DNA. You know, it sounds crazy, but it's true. Look at how water can be changed in its shape and appearance by playing different music, or by speaking to plants, or by even writing. There was a study done where they wrote the labels. 10 different water bottles had 10 different labels of just words written on them, and the water bottles that had words like "I'm going to kill you," "I hate you," were very, very turbulent and very disorganized. And the ones that had "I love you," "thank you" written on them were calm and peaceful. So there's energies and vibrations in these words, just like the same kinds that compose us and hold us together. So so these are the six. I'm forgetting one. The type of cell injured. Okay, or the type of self injured. So are you the type of person that's easily injured? Are you the type of person that doesn't care um, about other things that could be affecting you? So you have to keep these in mind, because once you know these keys, you can really tackle any type of situation the way our cells do. It's the same way.